Hello and welcome to Radio Free Nintendo. I am your host, James Jones, and I'm joined today by Mr. Guillaume Vayette.
Well, hello.
Mr. Greg Lay.
I can't. The thing is, with that octave of voice, I just thought you were going to say, I am the Senate. It's very sinister.
I'm going to sit here until I acknowledge that I introduced you. All right, well, that's going to be the show this week. And Mr. John Lindemann.
James, it's great to be here, I guess.
Look, I've been sick most of the week, and this is where my voice is. I can try to sound more normal, but it's just going to make my throat hurt, so we're just going to deal with it. Everybody, keep it together. I know it's real sexy. Let's just hold it together. Get through this.
You are
episode.
The man with the golden throat. So
is that a compliment to Head Gold? Do they work
I think so.
together?
I mean, it's in the neighborhood.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Might not be on the same street, but it's definitely in the neighborhood.
The respiratory gold system.
Yes.
As in, sounds like it needs to be coated with honey immediately, I think is what John is getting.
It basically is, so we're fine there.
Yeah, well, there it is. It's the truth of John's assessment has only been revealed.
Yeah. I've been a little sick, and I'm not feeling so bad right now, but all the coughing has done its damage, so this is where we sound. We're just going to have to get through this together. I should be good next week, and it's March 30th, 2023, and this is an episode number I don't have in front of me. That's a good time.
Is it 816?
I believe
It is.
so, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
wow. Episode 816.
James, I got your back.
Supported by John Lindemann, who I'm fairly confident is going to hold this against me for the remainder of the episode.
This is because I know everyone enjoys my Frasier references. This is like when he's sort of hosting when he shouldn't be. And because he's afraid like Niles is going to take his job from him or whatever because he's too good on the radio. So, yeah,
no, it's fine. Not a concern. Nobody's too good on this show. I actually
John might, just snatch it away from you.
I would absolutely adore if we just get a weekly Frasier reference going forward. This would be fine with me, and I would be totally okay with it. I actually listened to last week's episode driving up to Central Maryland from here for 2.5 hours, and only 3 times contemplated putting my car off the highway. So that's an improvement for the average RFN episode. We mentioned last week we were going to talk about, we were going to do part 1 of our Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker Retroactive, and we are going to do that. We are all at differing stages of the game, so we're going to pick it up again when Guillaume gets back. This is also Guillaume's last episode for a little bit. He's going on vacation, so we'll see him again in May, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, so we might take a week off there too, just for our own laziness.
Yeah, without Guillaume here, it's just not worth it. I mean, all right.
Well, I mean, I don't know that we really missed an episode last year. I think we went all the way through.
Yeah.
So, we've earned it. We're worth it. You guys can, we'll find something for you to listen to instead. Maybe I'll put out a Christmas album by then. You can listen to me sing in this voice.
No, it's a spoken word, isn't it? The man with the golden throat, with the Bill Shatner stuff.
And this voice doing Last Christmas, you gave me your heart.
No,
Rocket Man. Come on.
Last Christmas is one of those songs that just makes me see red because I heard it so many fucking times.
I think I recounted this off air, but the old days queuing up at the pharmacy while the Christmas music was blaring and the person in front of me listening to it said, "Makes you want to die." That's not see red. It's that sound because it just sadly it's been absorbed into that broader sort of mixtape that every supermarket or pharmacy has of Christmas songs. That is just
right around Christmas time, my local pharmacy that I go to, which is just up the street, had the glass in their automatic door shattered. And I went there on a Tuesday And then I went there again on like a Wednesday because one of my prescriptions wasn't ready. And the glass had shattered. And my only thought was, did I do that because of the Christmas music? And I just don't remember. I guess we'll find out if security tackles me. They didn't, so I guess it wasn't me, but I assume someone else did it.
So it could be like a very miniature version of Fight Club. You know, you've got another personality that's doing his own micro-scale Project Mayhem by breaking a pane of glass at a pharmacy.
Oh, I mean, I didn't know what other damage may have been wrought once I passed through that portal.
I'll tell you what, if somebody's been going around wiping all the Godzilla tapes for the what's it there? Oh, what is that guy's name again? Guillaume found it for me last week. The Independence Day director's name that directed that Godzilla movie. Somebody's been. It's probably you. If you've been wiping them all.
Definitely.
Emmerich,
anyway.
Roland Emmerich.
There we go. Yeah. But yeah, I'm fine. I just sound like the sergeant from fucking Chicago PD. So that's good. I'm glad I'm here. Man, he just goes around talking like this all episodes. It's great. Good show. Definitely doesn't make the audio recording a complete fucking nightmare and make him sound muffled compared to everybody else. Good casting. Good job, everybody. But we are going to do our Legend of Zelda Wind Waker Retroactive Part Uno after the break. We wanted to start the show because there's been a little bit of news this week, and I'm going to actually give them to you in reverse chronological order. We don't usually do news coverage here because we're not exactly the most timely podcast between recording and releasing. Also, during recording and before recording, and just generally, we're not particularly timely.
What are you trying to say about my Frasier references, James?
I think they're perfect and would like to hear more of them.
They're coming back. It's coming back. He's doing a new show of this for some reason. He's coming back. So, I mean, it's ahead of time, if anything.
Wait, are you serious?
There's something. I've not looked into the details, but it's some kind of revival thing happening with Kelsey Grammer. And no one else, because obviously he was like...
fucking Night Court. Jesus.
He was the big draw of the show.
Yeah.
It's fucking Night Court Part 2. God damn it.
Yeah, Night Court really bothers me. I mean, that's another rant entirely, but I'm very uncomfortable with that.
I mean, that show's not very good to begin with. Why did we need to reboot it?
I kind of liked it because it was so terrible in a way. Like, it was very, how many ways can we make John LaRoquette do a ridiculous euphemism for sex?
Yeah, I mean, I assume that this is really just a vehicle to put him on something in modern network television.
Yeah, but John LaRoquette is also like 80?
Yeah, he doesn't need this.
No, he doesn't.
Maybe he does. Maybe that's the dark secret here is that he does need this. I don't know, but we're here now. We live in the world of Frasier and Night Court revivals.
Anyways, hey Nintendo.
Yeah, they've greenlit 2 more seasons of Night Court, by the way, John, already. Just you can just live with that knowledge. Anyway, yes, news. There was news this week. I'm gonna actually start with the second news, which is not Nintendo. Because Nintendo had already said they weren't going to participate in E3 2023, which is supposed to be the E3 revival to return to LA Live. E3 is back. It's back, y'all. E3 is back. It's back. We're going to have the big show. It's going to be the floor. The public's going to be there. All the games. It's going to be the center of the gaming. Oh, sorry. I just received a notice on my watch that E3 has been canceled.
Mm-hmm. It's over. Just let it die. Please.
Yeah, it's
ESA.
And not just, hey, we're not doing that. So they said E3 2023 has been not going to happen. They did not make any promises of we're going to bring it back, though. I'll be honest. So in the lead up to this, it wasn't just Nintendo who said they were going to skip E3. Pretty much everybody said.
Yeah, Microsoft, Sony, you name it.
Yeah, but they've been out for a while. This really snapped a couple days ago when Sega, of all people, a company who has no shame and will appear literally anywhere.
They're like the drunk clown.
Yeah,
of the industry.
They are very cheap to book.
Yeah.
And EA. I mean, EA's not been there for a long time, but Bamco, Embracer, Epic. So like the Sega basically said, I'm going to read the exact quote. After careful consideration, we've decided not to participate in E3 2023 as an exhibitor. We look forward to sharing more information on announced and unannounced projects in the future. End quote. Around the time this got announced, there have been a few others in the interim, but around the time this got announced, there was a quote from, IGN had a quote, from a source who said, quote, "There is no possible way the show can happen." Just not a great quote. That's not the quote you want to read if you are trying to run the show. And of course, the ESA had handed over E3 to a private, event planning org. They've been doing this for a few years now to let them sort of plan it. And I would say they did not. Status not planned.
Yeah, it didn't sound like there was anything really to plan.
No. Well, there might have been, but they didn't do a job. I mean, step one needed to be to convince the publishers it's worth their time to be there.
Which is a tough sell these days in any case.
It might. I mean, maybe, but they sure didn't. They sure did not succeed.
Yeah, I just think these types of events are, they're just, everybody's over them.
Well, you say that, but TGS still happens. Gamescom still happens. Gamescom? I can never remember how many S's should be in Gamescom.
Yeah.
Game.com. That was the handheld.
That's a different thing, but both of them are diseased.
But I think, I don't think you were meant to vocalize the .com in it either. I think it was.
You just said Gamecom.
Then you shouldn't write it that way.
Yeah, I know. I agree entirely.
Are you really suggesting that Tiger Electronics doesn't know how to market their products? Makers of the R-Zone, the first video game console that rests on your forehead? No, they obviously know what they're doing. So I mean, I think the first thing you would have to do if you were a company hired before you even announce anything, which they definitely announced, you're talking to publishers and you're like, what do I need to do? Granted, they've had since 2020 to work with publishers to figure out what would attract them to attending a major confab. Because a lot of publishers planned to be in LA. I wonder if those things will get canceled too.
You need a hook, don't you? Say doing it on a boat.
Yeah, well, so that's where I was going to go with. We had when E3 2020 got canceled, which they were very reluctant to do, considering if you are listening to this in the far-flung future, in the year 2020, specifically in March, but really going back to 2019. A global pandemic of a respiratory virus, thankfully not the one I am currently dealing with, swept through the world, and it was highly contagious and largely an unknown infection mechanism, and humanity effectively had no natural immunities to it because it was a brand new variant of a corona-style virus. There, if you are listening to this year in the year 2040, you now have context. Your parents went through a pandemic. They probably had you because they were stuck in their house. They regret it. And you. So you can live with that knowledge. But they held out on canceling the show for a while, which was weird because travel was effectively shut down, and it was 3 months from when the pandemic hit, and it took them almost a month to go yeah, we're not doing this. I wonder if their reluctance was they felt like the only thing they had on their side was the momentum of the show happening, the regularity of it.
I think the final nail in the coffin is when the two Sony dudes who were hitting on the booth babe that was tethered to the 3DS that I was playing New Super Mario Bros. 2 on said that they were not coming back.
Nice.
I think that's when the E3 officials were like, well, we're really boned this time. And
you're saying we could have broken that story?
Well, I didn't know. I didn't keep in touch with them.
Yeah, it was just that one spring break, and that was it, right, Guillaume?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Look,
I think you probably got a point there, though. There might have been some people that realised, if this goes away for 1 year, it'll be much harder to get it back up and running.
Right.
So that would have explained the real. Yeah, because again, I mean, look, months later, sporting events were playing out in empty stadiums and, all that. So it's like, it was never going to happen in June.
No.
Was it? No chance.
Yeah.
But they dragged their feet on it probably because they knew it was already in a somewhat kind of perilous position because of the rise of, company specific broadcasts and all that kind of thing that had already been going on throughout the 2010s. And so there must have been some fear that it's like, yeah, this is going to be, a real blow and, re-establishing it will be a problem. And then, we had virtual E3 and all that business like the next year and stuff like that. And it's proven out. I mean, there are a lot of headwinds anyway, for something like E3 that, would always have been, you would have brought about its either outright demise or radical kind of alteration sometime, in this decade. But yeah, the way things went probably just accelerated that somewhat, I would guess.
Yeah, so to Greg's point, in 2020, we were doing the Patreon episodes, and also we were very bored, and we gamed out what they could have done instead of canceling E3. And we did suppose that, there's a bunch of unused cruise ships. What if E3 was held on a cruise ship? That way you can isolate and make sure everybody's virus free and then let them go about their day.
So it's the best, safest place to be at the time. There's definitely no evidence to contradict
There definitely weren't literal plague ships. But the whole idea was that you'd go roll E3 out into like the middle of the Pacific, and then it's
just international waters. You do whatever you want, make it more dangerous, more compelling.
But the secret was that
basically like Money Plane, but it's a boat and it's E3.
Yeah. The sad thing about that is that you would have. I mean, obviously, you would have had Tony Hawk on the ship with a full half pipe, so you would have had to kill Tony Hawk.
You can't have a geriatric in a virus conditions.
Same thing with Sting. You would have had to have Sting wrestling as well.
Oh, Sting's not going to job to the coronavirus. What are you talking about?
No.
He's just going to take off a mask, and it's going to be his face under the mask. But I want to say that particular version of events also had, there were actually multiple cruise ships, and people didn't know that they were part of the fake E3 versus the real one. And that at the end, we were going to sink one of the ships in the ocean for PR. It was just going to be like, it was a tragedy. I can't imagine how we're going to, fuck the Titanic. What about, we would never be able to stop having E3 if there's a Titanic story version of it where the entire conference was taken out by a cruise ship sinking. But of course, with the other boat, that's where all the real people were going to be. And then we were going to take them to an island and hold them hostage. I can't remember if I announced that part. I might not have announced that part. That part might have been only for me. That's unfortunate. That might ruin that plan. But I do think the E3 cruise ship has potential.
Also, this was I believe this Patreon episode was the one where we projected, the non-pandemic future that had, the Keeley Wars in it, which I feel like is sort of relevant because that is, the Keeley thing is basically, going to end up substituting somewhat for, this whole showcase business is going to essentially have a bit of the carcass of E3, I guess.
I think I just found my new job. World premiere.
Yeah. That's the thing. The people that actually say that, they don't just take one clip and keep using it 40 times. You have to keep saying
premiere.
it. And they've ruined their voice so thoroughly at the end of it that they have to go and put them down with a cattle gun. This is the kind of glitzy career that you can.
John, I need you to give me one of those really pained exclusive phrases. It's did you just say it's only exclusive to your console?
Consoles beginning with X exclusive.
Yeah, it'd have to be, console launch exclusive is my favorite.
World console launch exclusive.
Yeah, basically, I think you should go with as much detail as you should, and it's just like world premiere until, exclusive to Xbox until
world premiere console exclusive.
The contractually, the contractual element of, like it has to be like 8 months.
Yes,
anyway.
until the mandatory period of time that we were actually willing to pay for has passed.
Right.
And we were relatively cheap, so it's like 4 months.
World premiere launch day exclusive.
It was going to take us that long to debug the PlayStation version anyway.
Yeah, so basically it was free money. Free money.
World premiere home PC exclusive. What? Stop asking questions. I do think we could. I do think E3 could have been saved, but I don't think the crew they have involved could have done it. I think the ESA fundamentally didn't understand where the goose came, or how the goose was laying its golden eggs, because this was their primary mechanism of funding. I think making the show open to the public, which was their attempt, obviously, to change the funding mechanism. So previously the price had been effectively driven by the booth rental. If you're a major publisher and you want to have a booth at E3, you pay, and the booths had different prices based on their size and location, and that's more or less how it works. By selling tickets, they could, in theory, tell the publishers, hey, you can pay less for your booth, and we'll still fund from the ticket sales. The problem with that is if you're a publisher and the show floor is open to the public, you now have a different equation of how you build and staff your booth. And that means it's more expensive anyway. And also, you're not going to accomplish the primary thing you set out to do when you built the goddamn booth, which is to get the game in the hands of members of the media. But you know what people have had to learn to do during the pandemic? Get the game in the hands of the media without an E3. And they did. And so, fundamentally, if you were to try to, and I'm going to air quotes the shit out of this, save E3, you'd have to come up with something that provides a value proposition of that can only be delivered by centralizing the media circus. And this goes back to our conversation on directs, where if you're putting out a direct during E3 versus putting one out in a random March week, you're competing with so much more noise that your efforts are not going to be as rewarded.
Yeah, things have changed. I mean, the fact that you can download any console game anywhere in the world.
Yeah, that helps.
Really has changed the equation entirely. You do not, like you just said, you don't need anybody to travel in order to get your game out to them. All you have to do is give them a code or withhold a code if you want.
That's also true.
It even gave publishers more control over who gets their games. So
the one place where there's obviously difficulty is when you're dealing with a game that's not done yet, because it's not going to be up on the digital shops.
True.
I know during the height of the pandemic, some publishers did demos with, and I'm blanking on what it's called, but basically you remotely controlled the controller and you watched just like a feed of the video. Mm-hmm. Now, is that going to run super great? No, it's not ideal. But publishers also got used to bringing in small groups in a more socially isolated way, or not socially isolated, in a more like pandemic friendly sort of way, and hosting their own events. And now, Nintendo has major events, a couple times a year in the big markets, or in a couple big markets. Like New York usually has one. I think they have one on the West Coast often. We've talked about them. I need to try to score an invite to one. I usually find out about them like 2 days ahead of time, and I'm like, I can't get to New York on 30 hours notice.
Yeah.
But the basic idea is that just invite the people you want to talk to, not anybody who gets in the door at E3. And you're able to target your message to that audience. You're able to say, like, I want to speak to these 20 content creators. I almost said influencers. Jesus Christ. And like, who's going to show up. You know what they were going to want to talk about. You know where that message is going to go. You don't have to worry about, like, some random media cred from like the newspaper in Bangor, Maine showing up. Not that there's anything wrong with local news. I support local news. But it doesn't, Nintendo's not going to get anything out of that interaction. It just eats up their time. And look, I wouldn't be surprised if sometimes sites like NWR are looked at that way, where it's like, this doesn't really get us what we're looking for. But, it's part of the give and take. So this, the invite on these things is good for them. It gets them, it lets them control access much, much more better. But I don't know, so I've definitely gone to the most E3s out of the people here. And I'm trying to think of what I would want that show to be if I'm a publisher. And I don't think LA can provide it. Because I think the first thing I would want is for it to be cost effective. And has anything ever been done in a cost effective way in Los Angeles? Ever? And I don't think it's possible.
Probably not. Maybe a cost effective way, housing the homeless. Very low cost. Because they just don't do it.
Ow. Brutal. Jesus. Well, that took a dark turn.
Yeah.
I was going to assume that cost-effective kickbacks for whatever, or however much was paid in order to get the fucking stadiums built out in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, the SoFi. Is that cost-effective? When they're like, there's actually been rain and now it's like flooding.
I mean, there was a cost and it had an effect, I guess. But so I think what they could have done, John. You ready for this?
I am.
A co-branded event with WrestleMania 39 in LA and E3 at the same time. I'm just saying. It would have been, one, it would have been more interesting. And two, it would have been an absolute flaming train wreck of a disaster. And I like both of these things. I just don't think, I mean, LA's not the friendliest city to get around in. It's expensive. People don't travel for business as much as they used to. And we talked about it a couple weeks ago.
I also don't think that video games really care about the shine of Hollywood, right? Like, there was a time period where video games were really trying to, are video games going to supplant movies? Can a video game make you cry?
The video game industry, it makes more money than the film industry. News at 11.
And it used to be like, video games were always trying to kind of become movies or cozy up to Hollywood, and there's still some of that.
There's still a fair bit of that. I mean, I know, I agree with what you're saying. I think there's definitely more self-confidence now, of course, there should be. But the whole Keighley thing is that, isn't it? It's like this sort of mimicry and the star fucking.
Oh yeah,
it's
star fucking.
It's the right word.
Has there ever been a more naked case of that?
No.
I mean, there's still some of that. Like, oh look, it's I don't know. It's just one of those perverse things where it kind of the very exercise of trying to make the statement look we're as legit as movies, almost as like the most persuasive argument against that being true.
Right.
Because they're small, it makes them look the sort of, cloying, like, oh, look, we got Pacino to come out on stage and say something.
Right?
Look how big we are,
You know who else got Pacino?
You see some of the shit Al's been in for the, entire 21st century.
And also,
he was in fucking Jack and Jill doing a bit about how he's willing to sell out.
Yeah, but also too, Al Pacino pretty much comes out on stage and says, I don't know why I'm here.
That was the highlight to me. That was the best thing that's ever happened at the Game Awards.
It still goes on, but I think it is it's lesser. The progress is being made, but it's ironic to think of that Keighley is coming out of this more sort of with more stature, I guess. It was, or at least, like I said, it's getting some of the bones of this thing. When that's some of the most kind of. some of the worst kind of practitioners of that kind of like clamoring for some kind of broader acceptance or
we are
kind of
important.
status. Yeah.
This industry is important. If they just started like their press releases like that, they'd have been fine.
I did feel like there was something apt about the fact that this going down came the same week as the Zelda gameplay video, because I feel like that when they did Breath of the Wild, like it was just like the E3 2016 was just the Breath of the Wild show. Right, that's what they did, was just show off that game at length to everybody. And of course, it was a bad time for Nintendo. I mean, this is the very rump of Wii U. They have nothing for the holiday season of 2016, which of course normally a lot of what you know, everything of what you do at E3, but a lot of what you do at E3 is either, reveal for the first time or go in depth on your holiday games. They didn't have any, and so we
hadn't announced NX yet either, or at least what it was.
Well, because the Switchmas stuff was not until the following January, and even just like the sort of teaser for that,
was in October or November.
Yeah, exactly, a few months before that. So, they did have a lot to show. There wasn't a lot they could do. It's just like everything's still in a holding pattern. But that card that they chose to play, which was just like, let's just give people a chance to mess about in Breath of the Wild for relatively a long time by the standard of like E3 demos a lot of the time, where it's like, well, there's a bunch of different games, we've got to get people, there's a bunch of people, we've got to get them, in, play the demo, get out, get the next person, very sort of high volume. Was more about, let's use this as just a way of, getting people acquainted with like the whole ethos, the whole design paradigm of this new Zelda game, and hopefully the people getting the chance to play it is going to spread out, what the appeal of this game is going to be when it does launch eventually, which ended up being about 9 months away. But that was probably the last time it felt like they really accomplished something in an E3. Because like that was important. It was, they had a lot of things left to do right. In terms of making Switch a success and turning the corner on that really, really woeful chapter of, the back end of 3DS and Wii U just never really being a successful thing at all. But that was a step that was kind of big. After that, once Switch was successful, it's like, okay, they did a sort of similar thing in 2017 with, like giving everybody a lot of opportunity to play Mario Odyssey and all, but it just wasn't as important at that point, and of course, they were squarely in the Nintendo Direct age by this point. So, like, when all things go well, like that would be kind of, how they do their messaging and everything. But that was, I think, to me, it's not like the last time they did a stage show was the Nintendo Land thing, which was a catastrophe. They did things after the Breath of the Wild thing, but I feel like that was the last hurrah for Nintendo actually accomplishing something at an E3. And now that its sequel is finally about to come around, E3's dead. That's a kind of a nice cycle to it.
Yeah.
But even before Nintendo Land, did we mention Skyward Sword? The demonstration for that?
We did a bit, in terms of the technical difficulties.
We did last week, definitely.
Right. Anyway, like just like the technical aspect of it, like the interference that the controller was getting from the show floor made the demonstration just not work. Yep. And so, of course, that's something that's just not going to happen in a pre-recorded video unless someone is really not doing their job.
Oh no, I put in the B-roll by accident.
Oops. Even their 2018 E3 was, the floor was really just dedicated. I mean, there was more on it than that, because I did do that one. It wasn't like 2017 and 2016 where it was like, this is the game. Because the Switch was a vibrant ecosystem, but like it was really Smash centric floor. Like really, really Smash. Like I think half the booth was just Smash kiosks. And then I don't remember 2019. I don't remember what they would have shown 2019. then, of course, then that was it. That was the end of it. E3 2019, though, was when we got that first Breath of the Wild sequel teaser.
Yeah, that was the first time. Again, there's this. Zelda does have, beyond like Breath of the Wild and even Skyward Sword, Guild Edge, it's kind of inextricably linked with E3. It feels like that was always there, like when they had to come up with something like that was their preferred trump card. It was like, okay, E3 2003, that was embarrassing and it became this kind of risible thing or whatever. They just had Pac-Man versus, what do you do the next year to try and, rectify it? Twilight Princess. That's the big one, that's going to get us back right. And then, as you mentioned, like just clearly they were nowhere near having Breath of the Wild sequel ready to show in any serious form. But in 2019, they probably felt like, what? We need a little bit of extra pizzazz. We need to punch this thing up a bit. You go to Zelda. I think, not just because of its status as a series, which, it's obviously, especially Breath of the Wild, sold really, really well, but it's not their biggest selling franchise or anything. Nor has it generally been that close to being it. I guess like Ocarina of Time was one of the very highest selling games on the N64, but that's pretty much its probably relative apex. It's just, it's got that right mix of, it is commercially important, but it's also got this sort of prestige, maybe that even to people who won't necessarily like be definite to buy the game or whatever, it just connotes like significance, dare I say.
You should just put it on the front of the game. It's fine. It is, noteworthy, I suppose, that the other thing that's changed about the industry is how it's less dependent on annualization and like a new game coming out to make its money. It's more games as a service oriented, which doesn't like you're not going to have a Fortnite booth in the year 2023. Fortnite is still a thing. It doesn't need to have a booth at E3, but it definitely had one in 2019, which it didn't need. But it just
Fortnite might actually have an E3 booth in it.
Yeah, it's the reverse. If it was,
you can attend shows. You can see Christopher Nolan movies, and
there you go.
Also,
great.
You can go to E3 inside Fortnite.
You've got to go to the cinema to see Tenet, unless you watch it in Fortnite.
What if you watch it in the cinema, but you're projecting Fortnite onto the screen and then watching Christopher Nolan on that?
Yeah, and it's like if I wanted this sort of bullshit, I'd just watch Inception.
There you go. See, it all comes together.
Yeah.
So 2019's booth, that was actually more of a traditional Nintendo booth where they had a bunch of different things. So like they had a Luigi's Mansion Haunted House set up. They had Pokemon Sword and Shield. They had that Link's Awakening diorama where they made the game as like physical objects in the booth.
Yeah.
But it was just kind of like a collection of stuff. And Ultimate Alliance 3, remember that game? They don't.
I do, yeah.
So that was kind of what that one was. And then E3 died. It just took 4 years for us to realize it. So let's talk about the Zelda non-direct. Eiji Aonuma was announced about 3 or 4 days out that he was going to give a 10-minute presentation on gameplay of Tears of the Kingdom. This game comes out in less than a month now, right? Or is it just over a month?
Over a month, because it's the 12th, I believe.
12th, okay, yeah. So just over a month. And yeah, they basically said new features, and really it wasn't. He really, it was really just a couple features, but he demoed them quite exhaustively is probably the way to put it. A couple things to start with. There is a stamina meter, which good. That game doesn't work without a stamina meter. It just doesn't.
I guess that's some of these things. That we did see, you could regard them as kind of like not that consequential, but I'm sure there was still some question out there.
Right.
Probably
weapon durability is still a thing.
Yeah, depending on exactly how much you enjoyed certain aspects of Breath of the Wild as to whether they would carry over to Tears of the Kingdom. So for some people, I get, yes, things like stamina meter, weapon durability, all these sorts of, they got some answers on that, which is, again, when you think that there was like ostensibly at least some kind of footage shown in 2019, the fact that it's taken, this many years and until, the game's like 5-6 weeks away to actually get an answer on that kind of shows you how weird it's been.
Thing from game that already came out, confirmed to be in its sequel 4 years after it's announced. But yeah, so those two things, the most controversial components are there. I'm just gonna hot take here. I think Breath of the Wild would be a dramatically worse game without either of them. So I have no issue with their inclusion. But the first feature that he showed off addresses weapon durability, because we talked about this when that last trailer aired, where it was like, did these fuckers make Banjo Kazooie nuts and bolts? The answer is yes. These fuckers made Banjo Kazooie nuts and bolts.
No, in that regard, it felt like quite an apt sort of sequel to that trailer, if you like. In terms of, okay, that was one of the most notable things that was in that trailer, was just this, seemingly kind of cobbled together devices, vehicles, and things. And then it's okay, let's actually see what that means in practice and how it works and the ability kind of behind it and stuff. So it felt like kind of a logical progression from, just a trailer where you're just getting bombarded with imagery to like, okay, let's actually demo this stuff a bit, and so you get a bit of a better idea. But still, it feels like there's so much yet to be seen. And that's the big difference between this and, again, the position they were in E3 2016 of just like, not that they showed like everything of the game then, of course they didn't.
But they did show all the mechanics.
But it was 9 months away, and they showed that much of it because they had to, because they didn't have other things, and they wanted to just give something for people to hold on to, of like, this is coming in, it is going to be awesome. Whereas there it's more like, no, we could be a lot more kind of reserved about showing a lot of this stuff because we want people to be surprised. We want people to discover it for themselves. I'm sure there's always a push and pull there between kind of marketing and the creatives. Like, creatives are probably more on the side of like, can people just find this stuff out? And at some level, the other parts of the company are going, no, we need to give people a reason to go and pre-order this thing. But of course, with their commercial fortunes having changed so radically in that time, the other part of it I feel like can operate more, which is that's so much of in all its guises, the Zelda series, the joy of discovery is at its heart, and we don't want to have too much of that taken away by like hype videos or whatever.
I did see some people complain that let me start with the weapon durability part, and I'll come back to this. The ability to combine items isn't just to make vehicles, which is all we saw hints of that in that trailer, but they never explicitly acknowledged it. But you can combine like a weapon and another item to make a different weapon. So the example that in there is he's fighting with sticks, and sticks break very quick. Branches aren't great weapons in Breath of the Wild. You could do it, but why?
Well, you can beat Ganon with them, so why not?
You can. It's just not going to be very productive. He was able to combine using this new power. I can't remember what the power was called.
Fuse.
Yep.
He fused a boulder to it, and he basically turned it into a hammer. And so its durability went up and its damage went up. And so he was able to combine weapons to produce the one that I enjoyed was he combined a pitchfork and a spear and just made a very long pitchfork. Like, comedically long pitchfork. And he made it clear that you can combine more than two items, but they didn't really go into it because, again, that joy of discovery part. And then they jumped to the vehicles, including vehicle components that are powered. And there were some complaints that we saw. People said that like they didn't really give you context at why you would use these vehicles in the world, and it's like no, that's why, because they don't want to reveal that. They gave us a very simple case of there's a river that's too wide to swim. Well, we can make a boat. You can combine tree logs, etc., etc., etc.
One of the things that was tantalizing to me is that at some point, like he's firing an arrow, and then he can attach something to the arrow.
Yes.
And the meat is something that you can attach to the arrow. And I'm like, oh, can you combine the meat to other stuff? Can you create like a David Lynchian kind of weapon out of your nightmares? And I hope so.
I have Lionel Hutz nightmares, so it's just small world. So
you had a lot of business cards come back printed incorrectly that you've had to hand make the corrections.
So you joke, but my first NWR business cards were printed incorrectly. So yes.
Did I say David Lynch? I meant Cronenberg.
Cronenberg, yeah. I see, when you said Flesh, I assume so. Yeah, Cronenberg is the man who gave us Videodrome and the new Flesh and all this sorts of things.
The Fly remake and yeah.
Just recently, Crimes of the Future, where Viggo Mortensen is able to grow novel organs in his own body.
Novel organs, like comedy organs?
They organs that are hitherto unknown to biology, and he's able to will them into existence in a sort of. He's a performance artist, and this is his art.
It's like he could make an organ that gives himself remarkable virility. What's this do? It just produces a massive amount of testosterone.
I think that's way more practical than any. They're just like weird, like masses, you know. They're just very straight. Yeah. So no, he's still at it. Is the point? It's not just limited to films from the 70s and the 80s.
I have given myself 6 pituitary glands additional,
and now maybe this power is Link's to wield.
You know what?
Yes.
We also got a name for the power that we saw in some context. It should have in one of the really early trailers where Link leapt through the floor.
You can kind of like swim through solid matter.
Yeah. The degree to which this is available to you, though, was what was shocking. Link was in a cave and he went all the way up a mountain because
it's like anything that has a ceiling, and even if it's a really damn thick quote unquote ceiling, like being essentially in a mountain, you could just verticality. There was a lot of emphasis on verticality, as you might imagine, talking about the islands in the sky, but then also the idea that like some of them just like platforms just fall from the sky, and then you can use this as a conveyance because you have this rewind power that essentially just returns it to the sky, but this time with you on top of it. And that's a big like theme with the whole presence. You've got these Ouroboros like symbols, and all the music contains bits that are going backwards. Like, they're very keen.
We saw that in that first trailer, that reversing music. Like they were hinting at this shit a long time ago.
No, so that's clearly at the heart of it, and that's one of the ways, at least, that it's going to manifest itself in gameplay, is that ability to kind of rewind the sort of travel of objects and use that to your advantage.
It seems like they really have been hinting at some of this stuff since like 2019, which is wild. Even in that relatively banal trailer they showed. John, so did you see any of this video?
I have not. I kind of avoided it. I don't know. I
might not have watched it if I wasn't doing this show. You know what I mean? I would have been kind of 50-50.
It doesn't give too much away. I
wouldn't say so. I don't viciously regret it or anything.
I think they handled it pretty well. But I'll give you an example of what Guillaume was talking about. So Lynx pulls out his bow, and all those monster parts that you picked up in Breath of the Wild, and you could maybe use them for something, but mostly you just sold them to the weird guy that buys monster parts. If you attach, I think it was a Keese eye, to the arrow, it becomes a homing arrow. Yeah. Because as John Oman noted, he's not as good at aiming as he used to be. And so the arrow then becomes a homing arrow and just tracked down the Z-targeted enemy and slammed into him.
Yep. That's cool.
So John, I'm giving you a pitch here. So I pull you into a room. You are a experienced QE engineer. Mm-hmm. I'm pulling you into a room. You've played Breath of the Wild. You know what's up. Mm-hmm. I tell you, hey, I'm gonna have you lead the testing on the sequel to Breath of the Wild. Are you excited?
No. I just look at it and I would say, okay, there would be just a massive matrix of tests to run with the various combinations of those.
What if I told you I've also added the ability to swim through any vertical surface? Every vertical surface.
I would say that I'm going to go apply for the QA lead role on Elder Scrolls 6.
What if I told you you're going to be able to combine any item with any other item to make a different item?
Yeah, polishing that resume. Bethesda's going to love it.
You've already quit at this point. You're just like, nope, no. The testing effort on this game, there are definitely like bug report videos of absolutely insane shit.
Yeah, and I have to think, this game will be patched quite a bit.
Oh yeah. There will be jank at launch.
Because that's the thing.
Sure.
Look, I know they've spent a long time making it, and I'm sure the pandemic probably didn't help in that regard, and all sorts of things, but there's just no getting around it. A game with this many variables, people are going to do and find things you didn't envision. You just that's like really the whole point, right? That's what they want on a broader level.
Gameplay
is, and that really is like seems to be the main thing. With this video, you're kind of communicating is just the idea of like this is our kind of gambit to have, the kind of video sharing online of like a look at this weird thing that happened or look at this weird thing that I made in Breath of the Wild, like just taken to a whole other level now. Like they've got that down. They obviously saw that was a key part of, what was appealing about Breath of the Wild and what, enabled it to reach a bit further out and sell a bit more widely than, maybe some Zelda games have. So it's like, that is what we're doing. So that's great. But on the downside of that, it's like, no, you cannot possibly have accounted for everything, even close to everything. And people are going to find stuff that doesn't work. And it's going to have to be, heavily, patched and maintained to, get some of the nasty, the stuff that's really kind of counterproductive out of it. But yeah, it's just going to be fascinating to see because it is a dizzying, even just this glimpse, and I guess that's part of the point is it's leaving a certain amount to your imagination of just like, God, how deep could this go? How wacky could this get?
There were wacky videos out there from Breath of the Wild. In like the couple of months after launch, it was crazy. People just doing crazy stuff, launching themselves across the map.
But yeah, now it's that with more stuff and also the ability to put it in rewind.
Yeah.
Like, that physics engine is going to be on fire. Oh, let's put it this way. When I was watching my reaction to watching the video was just cackling. I'm like, oh, that entire QE team. Oh, God. This must be a nightmare. I was just like, oh, this is beautiful. This is just perfect. I love it. I can't believe they're making nuts and bolts though. I mean, I can't. Legend of Zelda nuts. Are we fucking for real? Rare must feel vindicated.
Yeah. Well, the thing about that, I mean, I've never actually got around to playing that, but it's like, so I'm wondering, like, if that had come out later, would it have like benefited from the kind of social media like element of like, look at this dumb thing I did or made in this game? Yes. Like, could it legitimately be said that it was ahead of its time?
Oh, absolutely. Because, later, after its time, when it started showing up again on like Xbox One, as part of the collection, like people were posting videos of like, look at this weird shit that I built. In a lot of cases, it was stuff people built back when the game came out. Like there's like a fully transforming Optimus Prime that somebody built once, and it became popular in like 2014, years after that person made it, and put a video on YouTube in like 480p quality.
Yeah. And the thing is, too, it's funny. I'm looking at the Nuts and Bolts Wikipedia article, and that game came out in 2008, but it says that Nuts and Bolts was released in November 2008. It drew criticism from fans for departing from the Banjo-Kazooie gameplay.
Right.
Now, that's the difference, is that same concept put into the Banjo-Kazooie framework doesn't work because people are like, this isn't Banjo-Kazooie.
Right.
But that same thing put into the Breath of the Wild kind of physics sandbox sort of gameplay framework, people are like, oh, cool, this is an iteration on what's already come before.
Yeah, well, as you said, already mentioned, John, isn't it? People were already trying to do this stuff, in ways that were, at best, like semi-intended, I guess. That was one of the draws of Breath of the Wild, was how kind of robust and comprehensive some of the systems were and the physics and things. You could do some strange things that, may well have been intended in some cases, may not have been. But it had the scope for that. But people were making weird conveyances out of mine carts and all this sort of stuff. And if to whatever extent Nintendo hadn't already considered it, it would have demonstrated to them that there, at least for some people, there's an appetite for this kind of stuff. And, perhaps if you had a formal infrastructure and tools for it, what more could be done? I guess the question, of course, with the original Breath of the Wild was, well, how well are people going to take, Zelda was a very well established formula, arguably a bit too well established at that point. So people were looking for a freshen up, a change up, but now, of course, as you said, at this point, it's, just a furtherance of something that was already there in Breath of the Wild. So, maybe for some people who were hoping, that it might actually hew back a little bit closer to, the older 3D Zeldas. Yeah, there's nothing in this to give them any encouragement. But
no, I've definitely seen some disappointment on that front. That I don't see dungeons. I was really hoping for dungeons. But, they haven't shown much of anything, really.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wouldn't entirely lose heart if that is your mindset, because, again, this is such a minor glimpse, especially. And there is still, a month plus, so we may get a bit more, things to be shown, before release, but it does seem like they're not going to give the game away in that sense, because it's just that is going to be a lot of the joy of people, sharing videos, like, have you seen this shit that can happen, basically? That is going to be a lot of it.
So. It was, like I said, they didn't show that much, so I don't know that there's a ton more to say.
No.
But, this game's, as Greg, as you said, like 5-6 weeks out, so, it's finally happening. And they've still really only shown, 11 minutes of gameplay.
It's not a lot, like I say, it's so different from last time. But that does kind of, that gives it that feeling of just on the one hand, it's been so very long, and for so many reasons, 2017 feels like a bloody lifetime ago. But equally, it feels kind of sudden now that it's going to be happening that soon.
All right, well, we're going to take a break here, and when we come back, we are going to do our first part of our retroactive on The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, so please stay tuned. are back with part 1 of our retroactive on Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker. We decided that any version of this game is valid of the two. So I guess I could have just said both versions are valid.
Yeah, it's any version. It's like
any version of the two of them.
The Tiger Electronics version of this game completely valid.
Well, we did that with Punch-Out, and I rolled in with the fucking Game & Watch version. But no, we're going to talk about Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker. We kind of said we were going to start with kind of the early part of the game for this retroactive, just for timing reasons. I had a bunch of releases go out, and then this trip, and so I haven't gotten to play as much as I would have liked to, although I made pretty good progress. John, I think you had some other stuff going on too.
Yeah, I did.
So, yeah, so we're just going to get in there. But I did want to give a little bit of history about this game before we get underway. Of course, this game just had a major anniversary. So,
yeah, it was around when we recorded last week, I think.
Yeah, it was. It was March 24th when it came out in North America. 2023. That's 20 years. This game is 20 years old. That makes me feel ancient. That makes me feel ancient, and I hate it.
Welcome to the club, my friend.
Well, the thing is, there's been a little bit of I've been on a run of 20th anniversary sort of content between, we had Prime and Fusion, both coming out again, and playing through those again, and they obviously came out roughly when Wind Waker came out in Japan. At the end of 02, and then this in 03. So yeah, it's been kind of a, relive. And of course, you also had in world events, you had a certain amount of coverage about the 20th anniversary of the start of the invasion of Iraq in 2003. So yeah, I don't know whether I'd call it 2003 nostalgia. Exactly. But it certainly, it brings back a lot of memories, and not all of them particularly good, I have to say. It's until recent years roared up the charts, it was probably some of the worst years of my life. So, on the one hand, I very much enjoyed the games, and there's a lot of affection for them, and they were very helpful in certain regards. It doesn't only bring happy thoughts to my mind, so hopefully that hasn't poisoned my impressions too much.
The Wii U version came out in 2014?
But
right?
13, I believe.
13? Okay. Yeah, you're right. September 2013.
Not too long after it launched, within the first so many months of the system.
Yeah.
I picked this up as part of the bundle that they released.
Yeah,
with
I remember.
The gamepad that had the little kind of etchings on it, right? Like the graphics.
It took them, quote, less than a year to remaster the entire game. Aonuma, quote, faced considerable reluctance from management due to players' mixed response in 2003. But, I think, one, God help us if they hadn't, because, like, the backlog need for a Zelda game on Wii U would go unmet largely forever, because 99% of people who played Breath of the Wild played it on Switch. But
I am the 1%.
You are.
Yeah,
we've been saying that.
I know. That's just how we've seen you already. It just confirms it.
So, yeah, I am playing it on. Well, we're all playing it on the Wii U. We talked about that last week. I could have played it on GameCube. I've played it. Well, let's just go around. So I bought this game at launch back in 2003. And I want to say I beat it in about a week and a half. Like, I just absolutely hammered on this game. Which would have been tough, because it would have been just before spring break for us. Spring break's about now. So I probably, if I beat it that fast, it must have at least been a little bit overlapping with spring break. And I have played the GameCube version, I believe, 6 times. I played the Wii U version a little bit back in 2014, according to the date on the save that I have.
Yes.
I looked at it. I have the 3 pearls and 1 more heart than that would account for.
Yeah, that's something that's like very, I find very much applies to this Zelda game versus all the others, like where for a big run of the game, a number of the times that I've played it, I really didn't have many more hearts than just the ones that you get given for completing a dungeon. Like that was just the way it went a bunch of the times. The one time that was not true for me was the first time I played it on Wii U. With the kind of, with the addition of the Swift Sail and everything that brings with it, not just the faster speed, but the essentially like speedboat nature of it, because you don't have to dictate a wind direction, to get going anywhere fast. That opened things up, and I actually did, collect a lot of the stuff that's out there, a lot of the treasures in the ocean, and actually, build up quite a lot of, hearts. And I was playing on hero mode as well, where there's at least a little bit more usefulness for those hearts, because even if you're not if you're not getting, like extra pieces of heart and stuff like that in this, rarely do you find that it's that much of a problem. They've calibrated it really with the expectation that you won't. It seems like, because it's like, sometimes when it's early in a Zelda game, that is the worst time with respect to damage, because like, you have 3 hearts, 4 hearts, and things will still do like half or 1 in damage. Whereas in this is like, no, like early on, like stuff will do like a quarter. So even if you don't have very many, you don't really feel like, oh god, I can't wait till I get more, because like I'm getting close to, I'm having to be really careful. Like it's very gentle.
I have, in this playthrough, I've gotten 1 extra heart worth of heart pieces and 1. And I'm through, so where I'm at now, so I had a really productive session on Saturday because the weather sucked. I basically got all the way to the Tower of the Gods in a sitting, which is pretty far into the game.
It is, yeah.
And at this point, I've gotten through the first of the 2 sage temples, because you have to do a bunch of like mini temple shit, and you can start exploring the world. That means I've only collected 5 pieces of heart in all that time. And I know where most of them are because I've played this game 6 times already. It's just like, a lot of them you have to do kind of annoying shit to get them.
Annoying yes and no. I've actually found that a lot of fun I'm getting out of this playthrough is doing that annoying shit, quote unquote. Because I don't... I find that I don't enjoy the dungeons all that much. Like, I find them sometimes fiddly or not all that interesting. There's a lot of block pushing. At least the outdoors get you away for the most part from the block pushing. And so I kind of, I don't mind as much, especially since you don't need to change the wind direction as much as in the GameCube version. It's a big help. And there's the fact that, like, I don't remember how many times I played it on the GameCube. It must have been at least 2-3 times. I'm surprised by how much I've forgotten about this game. Was this item that basically uses rupees instead of depleting your hearts always been in this game? I don't remember it. Is that a new thing in this version?
The magic armor thing. Yeah, like it's
right.
Because it's a similar thing in Twilight Princess as well.
I believe that's where it first came up.
That's what I was going to say. Because I don't remember if it was. It was conceived in Twilight Princess, and then they put it back in this, because I probably more thoroughly played it on Wii U than I ever did on GameCube. That's one of the differences, I would say, in terms of, and some of this is just what was going on at the time for me. I got it as quickly as I could. I was importing a North American copy for my NTSC GameCube. So it took a little while to show up. Postage from overseas was not as scarily fast as it is now. But I remember vividly, it was the day it arrived was the day they pulled down Saddam's statue in Iraq. I'll never forget it.
Amazing.
But I played it and I worked through it pretty fast. But basically, for me, that was off-term time. So I was at university. It was between the terms, and what happened then was basically once the summer term kicked in, that's the run up to the exams and everything. And basically, like, I did not get to do the kind of like thorough, like, let's go and find everything that I probably would have done otherwise. Like, certainly with compared to like Metroid Prime, that was something I did. I just exhausted that game eventually. It took a while, because it doesn't really like track the extra items like the way that Metroid Prime 3 did or some of the other games do and stuff. But I did it eventually because I had the time. Whereas just by the nature of this, I didn't get to like wring every little bit of enjoyment out of it the way that I would done with other Zelda games or other games. But, I did race through that. And I think some of it again was the feeling of like, I've got a little window in time to do this here. So, I want to kind of get to the end as quickly as I can. So that I think was part of it, as well as the nature of the game in that, these like kind of islands are, pretty isolated and it's not like a continuous world in that sense and stuff. So I think some of it was I wasn't as motivated to find everything as maybe in some Zelda games, but other it was just practical. And then when we got to Wii U, and it's like we've got off TV play now, and we've got the Swift Sail and all, and just the fact that I hadn't really exhausted it the first time around, I really went for it, and I kind of checked my save file from back then for this, and it's like, everything's filled in on the C chart, all the, the kind of, the little red rings you get for collecting the treasure chest that's got a chart associated with it for that sector and everything. Like, it was nothing like that on my original GameCube save.
So
yeah, I mean, I think I did a lot on my first playthrough. Probably not everything, but I did a lot. Like I spent a lot of time, as I tend to do with games. Spent a lot of time, going through the ocean, getting all the treasure chests, all of that stuff. So
I do want to issue a quick correction. There was magic armor in the game originally.
Okay,
but it drained your magic meter. In HD, it drains your rupees. So that is what the Malomart magic armor does. So I assume that's where they stole it from in the HD remake. So you were right. It doesn't do that in the GameCube version.
But its existence, I didn't remember at all.
Well, it's only available after you do the trading sequence for the island, which is already like way deep into the game side content. But then it can randomly show up in the auctions. So you have to then go into the auction and get it.
Which is where the Swift Sail shows up, it should be mentioned. Like, that is, It is quite curious as a way of like, as one of the kind of significant additions, alterations, kind of new features of this particular version, the HD version. To have it there in that you've kind of tucked away a little bit and kind of easy to miss was a bit strange. But I guess, more recently we've had the kind of, tying useful functionality to the Loftwing amiibo for Skyward Sword HD.
Oh,
so, I mean, it's not that odd, is it?
Right. As for like where I was back when I played it originally on the GameCube, I really did enjoy the sailing because I was also in university, but I was doing I don't have an exact timeline of where I was exactly when it came out, so I don't know if I first played it when I was in the dorms or if I was already doing my work terms in Ottawa, which Ottawa is a very, very boring city. I feel like Wind Waker and Animal Crossing were a good combo on the GameCube where I could just like relax after work without any friends around, and I could just go and explore or go and do some stupid chores to get fruit or whatever it was.
Adding some color to that drab world.
Yeah. And not even like I was not in Ottawa proper. I was in Gatineau, the suburbs on the other side of the.
Wow.
Anyway, so it was a Not a fun time, but I do have fond memories of just sailing around in Wind Waker.
I guess we should probably, since this is the retroactive, we should probably do a little bit of context setting too, because of course, Wind Waker, to go way back to the beginning, to its first reveal, all the way back at Space World 01, I believe. So there had been the tech demo trailer for the GameCube that showed the very high fidelity Link versus Ganon sword fight that would never happen on the GameCube.
Well, and also they were the Smash Brothers models.
Yes. Yeah.
And that caught fire on the internet at that time.
Oh yeah, because it looked cool.
It. Yeah, it was really cool.
It was this sort of like I don't know, because it was a much more pre-internet thing, what I'm about to reference. I'm not sure how many people put it in this context, but I did, because it was like talked about in magazines. Like when they had Space World for N64, like the really kind of major before the however many months it was before it was going to come out in Japan, probably like 6 months or something. They had a polygonal Link fighting a very sort of metallic looking, basically like the Mario 64 metalhead kind of reflective like surface that they had in N64. Link fighting an armored knight that looked like that again bore no resemblance to what the Ocarina of Time would end up looking like. It was just a tech demo that was Zelda themed, but that's the point. They had this sort of lineage of like, okay, we're doing Space World for a system. We have some kind of fancy looking Zelda themed thing where he's having a fight, and this time it was Ganondorf, and it was actually Ganondorf using that really big sword that he never uses in Smash Brothers, but he kind of has it on his victory screen or whatever, that eventually would come back for his smash attacks in Smash Brothers Ultimate. But that's how long we actually had to wait for him to wield that thing.
But of course, that wasn't a game in development. Now, Nintendo could have done a better job making that clear. When they did a similar trick on Wii U, with you can control the lighting while Link fought the giant spider monster.
Yes, it was not a sword fight in that case.
No, they were quite clear. This is not a game in development. This is a tech demo.
And so the important thing is, even really whether or not that game was in development or not in development, the expectation that demo set in everybody's minds that this is going to be what the next Zelda game looks like. Not so much from exactly a visual standpoint necessarily, but the next Zelda game is going to be quote unquote adult, mature. That's what people were expecting.
And kind of a continuation of the path that it was already on the N64, right? Like it was not.
Yep.
It's hard to tell because like the N64 graphics are so primitive, but people didn't see it. Didn't see Ocarina of Time. Didn't see Majora's Mask as cartoony, even though they definitely were. To a point.
Well, and you think of the actual, like, the kind of character art that if you actually looked at the character art that the polygonal graphics were meant to, kind of resemble, it was, an anime, kind of influence was quite obvious,
right.
Other than, like, older Link looking suspiciously like Leonardo DiCaprio, I would say.
Right. But there's also kind of like the direction that all video games, basically, maybe outside Nintendo, were taking, which was like, well, with this increase in power, this jump in hardware, we're going to increase the fidelity. We're just going to have basically the same stuff as before, but more detailed. And maybe like more realistically proportioned, more, you just look at Final Fantasy, the path that took. And I think that's the path that a lot of people were hoping, in a way, that Zelda would follow.
Yeah, and it's no coincidence that the next game in the series, at least the console series of it, is Twilight Princess.
Right.
It's a darker game, more realistic looking.
Well, and also post Jackson Lord of the Rings, like painfully post Lord of the Rings.
I mean, the music they showed in the trailer was
from Conan the
Barbarian.
Yeah, they'd already used that.
Blades will bleed.
They'd used that for Ocarina of Time advertising.
What a ridiculous statement! Blades will bleed. What the hell?
Blades will be shields will shatter. It's like, no, they won't.
Although,
when
one
the
thing,
shields do shatter,
to kind of impress upon people just how, hardcore, fuck yeah, the Space World teaser was, that, they sort of spar for a bit, Link and Ganondorf, but then, at some point, Link just gets so, like, oh, screw this, that he throws his shield away, and then just jumps at Ganondorf, you know what I mean? Like, he's like, screw this defense bullshit. I'm just gonna go right. That's the kind
I don't need Z locking or Z targeting.
No,
right.
Screw it. I'm going off script.
Yeah, so, presumably this is what people, I mean, I don't know how many people would have actually seen it in motion at the time, because, a lot of it would have been, either, like, in the magazines again, or, website, not a lot of video going along on websites back then, not much, or not any of any particular quality anyway, but...
Real player, yeah.
It did, obviously people, were excited, and then that meant that when the actual game and what it actually looked like came along, it was not greeted with the most overwhelmingly warm response.
Right, so, especially since a lot of the people need to remember that there was a console war raging back then, and
I mean.
The people were already, like, it seems like a lot of Nintendo fans were already... Like we talked recently about kind of the trauma of not having games being released for their consoles, and there was also the trauma of being called Kitty.
Mm-hmm. The trauma, yeah. So this was
perhaps even Tech Kiddie.
Yeah. So this was OG Xbox versus PlayStation 2 versus GameCube.
Right. Yeah,
which was not much of a war, was
it?
It's
you had already had
warfare is just people getting pissed on from a very great height.
There was, and again, and to add even more context into this mix, the defection of Square Enix over to Sony's platforms had already happened. So, Final Fantasy starts, it builds a huge fan base on Nintendo systems, and all of a sudden, it's gone over to the PS.
I mean,
and there was at this point, there was no sign of them kind of reconciling. They would reconcile-ish during this generation with the Crystal Chronicles stuff, and it actually, basically, so Square could put things on GBA, which, the handheld side of Nintendo's business, was enjoying the post-Pokemon, kind of renaissance, but, that wasn't even, we didn't even know that would happen or could happen, and it still meant that the big numbered Final Fantasies were not going to be anywhere near anything other than PlayStation for the foreseeable future.
And there was still a lot of bitterness there. That was still a thing. Like, I mean,
I'm sure.
Like Final Fantasy VII, that moved over in 1997. And, this is 2003, 6 years later. But as you know, video game fans do not forget. So in any war, you know how it is.
We're never going to have a Kuji the Heartless, John.
Exactly, and I'm still bitter about it. But yeah, so that still loomed large. That was still, very much in the minds of Nintendo fans. They were still very self-conscious about Nintendo platforms being
Kitty.
Purple?
Yes. Well,
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, there's that, but also, like, you're dealing with what Xbox was putting out at that time, which was parody. I mean, my go-to is Bloodwake. Because that's such a stupid fucking phrase.
Which is arguably more risible than, like, Bone Storm as a name.
Oh, yeah.
But Bone Storm is the Simpsons parody, and that's real.
Yeah, because they felt that there needed to be a car combat game, because all the systems had car combat games. The N64 had Vigilante 8, the PlayStation had...
Twisted Metal?
Twisted Metal. So we need to have our own, but we don't want to be derivatives, so let's make it boats. So it's going to be Bloodwake, because it's going to be wake from the boats. It's a game about shooting, so if you're bouncing, the nose of your boat's bouncing, shooting kind of sucks.
Just get a gimbal.
Exactly. Or Azurek Rise of Paranthea, or whatever other fucking horse shit Microsoft was putting on that console, because they didn't know any better, and they had an infinite budget.
I think this is the real point, though, that John brings up, is that what it meant is that Zelda had these expectations and weight attached to it. There wasn't even about be a good Zelda game.
No,
it was about like just be everything we want to see on the system, even, you know, like substituting for the loss of other franchises that aren't coming back, or, you know, it's like, I don't know what, you're asking it to do something that's just completely, you know, as it could have been, you know, the most exquisitely well executed Zelda game they've ever made, which I don't think it is, even though I like it a lot. And it couldn't have come close to what was being effectively asked of it.
Yeah,
you know, to carry this awful burden.
Yeah, there was this kind of pissing contest to see who could have the best mature games at this time. Yeah,
and this was, and so to give some context on how this game got to where it ended up being. So Space World 2001. So Space World 2000 is when we saw that tech demo video. 2001 is the first time they showed Wind Waker. And the response was, we'll call it hot. People were not happy, because of this whole thing. But how we had gone from 2000 to 2001 is Aonuma, and team who were making the Zelda games at this point. He took over during Majora, I believe.
Yeah, Miyamoto would have been kind of effectively the director. I'm not sure if they actually referred to it as such, but, you know, the last time he did that was on Ocarina, and then, for Majora's Mask was obviously very quick turnaround, to say the least, as we've mentioned recently. You know, it was like a really, really tight deadline, but they, I guess, you know, kind of saw some value in trying to capitalize on the fact that Ocarina had been a success, but it had also been a very, very long and arduous process to get it to that point. And it probably felt like, look, we would like to get more money back, you know, to get more revenue generation out of all the work and time, valuable as it was, that went into making Ocarina of Time. Like I said, it was one of the best-selling games on the system, and yet they still probably felt like, yeah, we could use with getting a bit more money out of all that went into that, and that was Majora's Mask. And, you know, it's kind of, I always think it's like remarkably coherent and compelling as a Zelda experience when you consider the nature of it. But this was the next true Zelda. You know, you would had Oracle games in between, we'd had Majora's Mask, but again, in terms of those expectations, it's like this has got to do what everything that sort of Ocarina did, and then some kind of expectations.
Right. So the Zelda team felt that they had basically done everything they could do with that like more adult style, air quotes, of Zelda. And so they were just basically grasping in the dark, trying to figure out what to do. And one of the designers sketched a child Link very much in the style of this game. Because, of course, this game is very child scaled. And then they did a few other sketches. And from that point, it caught fire about the different ideas they could do. But one of the quotes that's come out since then, Aonuma noting that they kept development of the game secret inside Nintendo because, quote, if I had gone and talked to Mr. Miyamoto from the very beginning, I think he would have said, how is that Zelda? Miyamoto had trouble letting go of the realistic Link art style until the very end. At some point, he had to give a presentation against his will. That's when he said something like, you know, it's not too late to change course and make it a realistic Zelda. So even Miyamoto wasn't convinced by this art style until much later that they had made the right call.
The thing about it as well, I have to say, and I think this did not, all the stuff that has been brought up about, the kind of the cultural context and the console wars pissing match and all that stuff, I think it was all against it being well received under any circumstances. But it was still true in, like you said, Space World 01, about a year before it comes out in Japan, that there was a lot of video. People just saw quite bad, like, off-screen, like, shots from that event. It wasn't even like a direct, you didn't even, like, the first thing you saw wasn't even like a direct screen capture or anything.
No direct feeds.
No, you didn't tend to see video of any sort. So you didn't see it in motion, you didn't see it looking good. All you saw was the fact that, it's a younger Link, in a cartoon style, like, for me at the time, I was like, oh, that kind of looks like Powerpuff Girls. Like, what, you know, like, but
right.
Yeah, a little bit.
He looks a little bit different from how he ends up looking in the final game.
True,
too.
yeah.
Like
true.
it was a very early video, and so
it was a year before it came out in
Yeah.
Japan. So,
And-
which in those days was a bigger amount of your development time, because even though obviously the jump to 3D to polygonal and all was a big one compared to like the Super Nintendo era, it was still not the HD era. It was still not the, you know, just the immense amount of work that would go into games, and therefore development times, especially on a big, you know, action adventure like a Zelda game compared to today.
What's amazing is the response. So this would have been August of 2001 when they showed it. The response was so negative to the graphics, the infamous Zelda, C-E-L-D, because it was cell shaded, that Nintendo put a lid on the game. That they decided they just weren't going to talk about it until people could play it, because it wasn't playable.
I just think, like, for with this moment, there was a lot of people that weren't going to be very warm on that under any circumstances. But if you could have seen it in motion, because that's really where it shines. It's like, it's not just that, the character design itself. It's how everything kind of, the way everything animates is in perfect synchronicity with it. You know what I mean? Like the way that everything is this sort of bouncy, lively quality to it that is so kind of in tune with the cartoon style. Just like, you don't get I certainly did not get the idea of, you know, what it was going to look like until, you know, much later. And really until I actually played it firsthand, you know,
Agreed.
so you could really appreciate, what they were going for, what they were doing. And that's one of the problems, is just like it didn't show well. It was still an era where screenshots ruled the day, and it didn't convey the appeal.
I mean, one of the things that, and Guillaume touched on it, they changed the eyes between the reveal and then the later E3 demo. Is that, in the same note here, that Miyamoto and co wanted to know why everyone's eyes were so big. And in a very Aonuma response, they suggested that they might shoot laser beams. but ultimately, the real reason is, one, it's part of the cartoon style, but two, it's because the game actually Link will look at things that are important as a hint to the player.
Yeah, they really pushed that eventually. I thought, maybe not in that first showing, but like, look, this is part of a way we can actually communicate things to the player, but in a way that feels like perfectly organic within this aesthetic. It doesn't feel like it's a big glowing like arrow or something. It just
hey, listen,
right?
Yeah, or that indeed. So like it just, but none of this really came across very vividly.
No, and so
there was not that kind of thing had been done before, like Grim Fandango, like Manny Calavera's head would swivel towards to look at something that you could interact with. But it's much more striking, of course, in Wind Waker, and like you really see his eyes, his expressions, and it gives another dimension to it.
That's the thing. It's a lot, because again, like something that was even earlier than this in terms of like 3D graphics, Mega Man Legends. Like they could do a lot more with having relatively expressive characters for the late 90s because of that art style. Like it was actually, a very sensible choice in terms of like this allows us to convey things to the player, in a way that, it's going to come across in standard definition, before you've got, everybody had gigantic TVs that displayed high resolution to pick up on tiny little details that, like the consoles of the day couldn't even render such detail anyway. Like it was very practical. And, when you actually see it, and even, more so in retrospect, it is also just, attractive in an absolute sense. So it was like a very wise sort of decision making in one sense, but in the commercial sense, and especially the kind of public relations sense, it did not feel so wise at the time.
But the the putting a lid on the game turned out to be a benefit because the press got to play it at E3 and it demoed really well. That was when they introduced the mechanic of Link being able to pick up a weapon that the enemies drop, which turns out to be a big deal in that game. That in the counter button stuff shows up, the tightness of the combat, like that game, the game feels a lot brisker than the Ocarina of Time Majora's Mask duo.
It's a good refinement, a significant refinement. Obviously, when you go back to it now, it's not, like it's pretty simple, and stuff. But it feels like it's tighter and refined compared to, obviously they nailed down some of the real, kind of specifics in Ocarina with the lock-on targeting and
right.
kind of shielding and stuff, and that kind of felt like bringing some of what you would do in Zelda 2, when you're kind of sparring with enemies and trying to get past their blocks and things, into 3D. But here it just feels like that, but, in a much more kind of, enjoyable and brisk kind of way.
The thing that I think really helped this game, though, is coming out of that E3. All the impressions, obviously, including people who were down on the graphics, from that Space World demo, which at that point was 10 months prior. Basically, people coming out and saying, hey, it looks really, really good in motion. It feels really nice. It fits the style. These things work well together. It's really good. You should be excited for this game. And then Nintendo very smartly baited pre-orders with the Master Quest
right.
GameCube game.
That disc, yeah.
I've got it. It's right there.
Yeah, I still got it too.
Where they used components of the unreleased Zelda 64DD expansion to make the Legend of Zelda Master Quest, which just means like weird shit like sticking cows in the wall of Jabu Jabu's belly.
Mildly remixed dungeons.
Yeah. And occasional like weird fucking thing that would happen.
I'm presuming just like a few like fixes here and there. I mean, I know that there were additional cartridge runs that fixed a few things, even. But yeah, I assume like they had that and more in what would have been a disc drive version. Even though the whole game was meant to be a disc drive game, and it was a whole saga. But it was a nice idea, to have. Hey, look, you've got you can play Ocarina on your GameCube, and you can play this version that you've not been able to see before, that you had a certain amount of currency out there for enthusiasts. The idea that they had been making it for the disc drive, and then there was going to be a further version, and we just didn't see that.
Yeah, so that kind of helped keep momentum going. The game comes out. If you pre-ordered it, you got the gold copy, which I have. It's very fancy looking. And then they did a later run that as a bundle that had that weird disc with like the original Zelda 2, Ocarina of Time, Majora's. Like, this is almost like a proto-virtual console where it's like we've put an emulator on your system. And
they were experimenting in this time. Obviously, Animal Crossing comes along and gives us NES games inside the game, and we have e-reader cards on GBA, and we have the Famicom Anniversary cartridges for GBA, and all. It was like, okay, well, do we do kind of free giveaways? Do we do pre-order incentives? Do we do standalone physical things? They were trying little bits of everything until, when you get to 06 and we get Virtual Console.
Yeah, this is them acknowledging that their back catalog has value in and of itself. And so, that led us to the actual launch of the game. Like I said, I think we all played it pretty close to launch. I think is what we've cooked.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I at the time, I remember thinking that this was my favorite Zelda game.
I was really excited, I think, because it was unlike Ocarina of Time, but quite like Majora's Mask. We had the thing where it'd come out in Japan, And then months went by, and then, I didn't wait to get a European version because I didn't have a GameCube that could play European games, but I needed an English language version, really. So the wait for it to come out in North America so I could play it, was pretty, kind of tough, but I think more so in some ways compared to Majora's Mask, even though that was longer, because that was like several months rather than 3 or 4. But I think it was because by this point I was reading Planet GameCube, and so everybody, it felt like at the time, had got a Japanese copy and posted a review on Planet GameCube, and they loved it. So it was a bit like the Mario Sunshine thing, where like loads of people reviewed the Japanese Mario Sunshine. But the difference is I got the Japanese Mario Sunshine because it's Mario. I don't need to know the text. So I was playing it, alongside everybody else.
Little did you know you were missing out on the kangaroo court storyline of Mario being convicted for a crime that observably happened while he was on an airplane.
Yes, well, it's one of those things. I often sort of bristle at the kind of notion that things can be better left to the imagination as a man who barely has one, and yet even I could probably imagine something better than that. But the point is, the anticipation in this case really got turbocharged because it's like, these reviews have got, it wasn't just obviously for Planet GameCube either, a lot of, by this point, there was just a lot of stuff you could read online of people that had played the Japanese version and, just a lot of people that I read anyway really, really liked the Japanese version. And, again, I hadn't seen much of it in motion myself, but I did at least have the fact that your people kind of vouching for it. Oh, no, we've played the final game or we've played it at E3. Trust me, it looks great, all that kind of stuff. So I was really, really excited by the time it came around.
Yeah, it was not, I was on the IGN boards, so I was probably, influenced by whatever shit was going on there. There were trolls on the GCN boards and stuff like that.
Like yourself, Guillaume. Those were probably not your finest days.
I was fighting the good fight against the trolls. But, I was a shit also.
We had to be,
I don't remember
that's
exactly.
The problem, isn't it? They take the best of us and tear them down.
That world shaped me into what I became.
Into the misanthrope you are today.
As John Rambo told us, if you want to survive war, you got to become war. It's just the way it is.
God.
Ultimately, though, like Wind Waker, I was excited for it. In large part because I had skipped at least 2 Zelda games, I enjoyed Link's Awakening on the Game Boy, and then I never got an N64, and I experienced Ocarina of Time just by going to a friend's house who was renting the console and the game.
Oh, wow.
Right.
So it was, a lot of stuff that I saw in Ocarina of Time, I saw out of context. I didn't see the progression, how did you get that big sword? Why does it suck? All that stuff, I didn't.
Why does it suck?
Well, why does it though? I still.
You'd think it'd be better considering all the work that goes into getting the Goron sword,
right.
But it's one of these things. Maybe they should have just had it as not just the trading sequence, but also some sort of post game item that was ridiculously good, because it almost feels like,
right.
Well, we can't make it too good because people will get it before the end and then just completely wreck stuff. So they just kind of felt like maybe it was meant to be better, but then they kind of nerfed it or something. It just felt like they ran into a bit cross purpose. We want this cool reward for doing this very long, straw millionaire trading quest.
But not too cool. Yeah.
Yeah, but not. But we didn't want to muck up the balance of the game for the people that actually did go to that effort.
So I think I was looking forward to it a lot. I wasn't put off by the cartoony look, and I also I think I was looking forward to playing Ocarina of Time for the first time from beginning to the end. I have mostly good memories of that time outside of the IGN stuff.
And then of course we talked about it, but the Wii U port was really just like a everything must go fire all the cannon shit. Keep the
it was that's when it was announced, right? Was at that the desperation direct and also the first allusions to what Breath of the Wild would be in terms of like, we're doing this now, but we're working on a Wii U exclusive, which obviously ended up being a lie, Zelda game that will have a more non-linear structure and all this kind of stuff. But I guess you see a few things in this that kind of like suggest Breath of the Wild here. That, like as you already mentioned, James, the weapons, like picking up enemy weapons and using them. Even though I do feel like, I don't know whether this is because of playing Breath of the Wild since, but, I remember in this playthrough kind of coming against the moblins, and they have the long spears and, picking up a spear and then he just swings it like, he doesn't use it like a spear, he doesn't use
he's a child. He doesn't understand spears.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in like a narrow corridor, he can't even swing it effectively because it hits the wall and it does nothing. And so it's just like, God, was it always this pointless?
Yes. It's good in very specific uses. So like if you can get the Dark Nuts swords, it's very good for countering them because it does a shitload of damage. What
I enjoy doing, and this is very much the Smash Brothers player in me, is throwing the weapon away at them. That's if you draw your sword, you throw away the sword or sword kind of replacement. So there's actual puzzles that kind of use that as a kind of mechanic, but also in combat is you can do a nice bit of damage with that, and that is something I've never, since the very first Smash Brothers, I've never got over the amusement of just throwing a lightsaber away at someone in the air towards the edge of the stage and plonking them right in the face.
But you can also do the Breath of the Wild thing of take their weapons from them and then just launch them. So it's like, no, you don't get to have a weapon now. You're going to fight me barehanded.
Yeah, they can't get them away, so they can't retrieve it. Yeah.
And I was playing the dungeon. I can't remember what the
Forsaken Fortress.
No, I was the one with the melody. So late in the game.
Oh
the Earth.
Yeah, the problem is there's like the Earth and the wind, and like I believe
they feel reversed.
They're wrong.
It really does feel reversed. It's like, wait a minute,
because
the one where I'm planting,
the girl with the wings is in the Earth Temple, and the dude
she's in the Earth Temple where she's going to replace the fish,
and also like the one where you plant seeds to grow trees isn't the Earth Temple.
No, it's like they messed up the it's like they messed up the names and they're like, no, we're going to stick with it.
I always imagined it was just this weird overhang of like dungeons that they had planned not being implemented, that just like, okay, like there was at one point probably a third one of these, as opposed to just two. And, they ended up like contracting like things, into each other. And you just ended up with this completely sort of weird theming, like, because the theming is so much more distinct in Ocarina of Time, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like,
there's no theming in these
You're not
dungeons.
going to mix up, the Shadow Temple with the Water Temple, are you? You know what I mean? But
yeah.
But I was going to say is in one of the rooms, there's a bunch of Dark Nuts. And I just lobbed all their swords out of reach. And so then they're all just squared up to punch me. And so I just started heaving bombs at them because at this point, I like to explore in this game. My love of exploring is well documented. I've talked about how
almost as much as
you're a big Metroid fan.
No, because that's not exploring. That's backtracking.
Almost as much as your love of the big ape.
That's true.
That's probably of your many loves. That's the most well documented.
It's my first love.
But after the most it's exploring.
But I've got all the upgrades now. It feels like they're easier to get, or at least a lot of them. So I've got 99 bombs. So fuck you, Dark Nuts. I'm just gonna heave bombs nonstop.
No, especially like with the way that you can. Kind of move in first person while you're shooting arrows or using the boomerang or all that, like that I'm quite sure was not in the original Wind
No,
Waker.
it was not.
Yeah,
No.
and it's not in a lot of other Zelda games when you have, obviously you started with Ocarina of Time, where you go into that first person kind of view for, you're using, the slingshot or the bow and arrow, whatever. Like, it feels like, it's still, even that playing it now, it feels like this sort of like weird liberalization. Like, I can do this, but it also makes the enemies like more, like, fucked. Because you could you're so versatile, like, especially stuff like, say, the whiz robes, that kind of appear around you, and then you have to shoot them, at range. Like, when you could just go in first person and, like, you're not relying on locking onto them to shoot them, them just, like, disappearing, reappearing is really, like, nothing. You know what I mean? It's not a real factor. It's just like, no, I can just keep moving and, looking around, and you can use the gyro on the Wii U gamepad to find your target, shoot it. It's easy as pie. It's gone. So it only adds to the fact that the game is very gentle, but it makes it also just quite a, kind of expeditious experience. It's smooth, it's quick. I think one of the things that's really nice about it is, and this was somewhat, quite a lot true, obviously just when it came out for Wii U, but even more so now when there's just no expectations. But what I mean, like the complete opposite of what John was talking about early on, where it's like this thing has basically got to make everything right with the world. Like that.
And maybe Dad will come back.
Yeah, now that we're totally past that, it's like it's fine that it's kind of short or easy if you want it to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it just makes it quicker and fun to go through. Like it makes it a more replayable game than quite a few of the 3D Zeldas are.
Like this whole, like, you can move while so people who haven't been playing the HD version might not know this, but you can move while you're aiming about anything. So that goes for the bow and arrow, but it also goes for the not the hook shot, the other one, the grappling hook. And that fucked me over initially because I was not used to it, and I was just like, I'm kind of unconsciously holding forward as I'm aiming for the grappling hook, and so all of a sudden Link is hanging from the ledge. And I found that so annoying initially, but then like you get the bow and arrow, and it's like, oh, this is a first-person shooter now. This is weird, but also very useful.
No, I had to kind of reprogram my brain a bit, because sometimes, like, if you get, like, you're doing something in a dungeon and you've got to line up, like, a shot or something, and you kind of take the arrows out, or you take a hook shot out, whatever it might be, and you kind of think, oh, no, actually, I'm not quite at the right angle. There's this, like, instinct to go, okay, let's come out of that view, then reposition, then get the item back out. But, and then it's like, no, I don't have to do that. I could just, take a step back or whatever, and now that is in my sights, and bang, and you've got to sort of train yourself out of the sort of habits that are built up of playing, a lot of those 3D Zeldas a great deal, but it's just, again, like, it doesn't make the game the most exquisitely balanced Zelda in the series, but it definitely is part of, kind of like the Swift Sail, some of the other things in it, or like, kind of like the whole lock-on free aim in Metroid Prime. Like, you kind of tell, the game's not really balanced around it and all that, but it is smoother, it is kind of more fun.
The change in controls in the HD version also made it so that I found that I can't assign the boomerang to any other button than the R button, because it used, like in the original version, you would aim the boomerang with the left stick, and they changed it to the right stick in this one. And so if you assigned your boomerang to X or Y, then you can't aim and
get to the stick.
shoot. Of course. You can if you don't, like, you can use the motion controls if you're only aiming at one thing. But like a lot of the puzzles, they're not just asking you to aim at 5 things and then let it rip. like the 5 things are going to be all around Link.
Yeah,
and if you're using the motion controls to do that, you're going to be.
It's all right
unhappy.
in a limited area, but yeah, when it's like
Yeah.
all right, there's a target that's a bit more away, that's what you kind of need to use the stick. I still like using the motion controls, but as ever, I always say it's kind of nice for those fine adjustments. For the big adjustment, you want the stick, because otherwise you're just going to be like getting into some sort of pretzel thing, trying to lift it over your head or something.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've found, and is that just how, like, the start of the game is kind of slow, but just like how fast I was able to get doing stuff. Like,
it is kind of slow, and I guess especially compared to Breath of the Wild, but then, like, compared to Twilight Princess, it's searingly fast as well. So, there is that.
Because, where I'm at now, I've cleared most of the main dungeons, and I've already got some of the Triforce. I would guess I'm at less than 15 hours. Maybe a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm probably well past halfway at this point. Like, if
you're just talking about, seeing the credits, being Ganon, that's the thing is, I think this was something, again, at the time, obviously it reviewed very well in the main. The critical response was very good, but I think there was a little bit of like, isn't it over a bit quickly? Isn't it too easy? And, there's some legitimate sort of components to that, but I think a lot of the weight to that sentiment was just around the fact of like, this is the big game that's got to save Nintendo's fortunes. It's got to save the GameCube. It's got to prove that they're, at the top of the heap when it comes to making these grand action adventures. So it's got to be this long. It's got to be this challenging or whatever. And I mean, that Nintendo themselves demonstrated that they felt those pressures by some of the bullshit that they put in the game.
I mean, How Long to Beat.com has this as the main story as 25 and a half hours.
Believable.
Yeah. Yeah. So in main plus extra content, 34 hours. Now that's an average of what people have self-reported. But you're looking at probably about 25 to 30 hours.
And I've noticed, and I'm sure I must have noticed this at some point, but there is a lot of, I would guess, learnings out of Majora's Mask's approach to side content, where it's like you get some hints, like maybe subtle hints. Maybe it's a character who only shows up at night, hiding in the corner, who tells you to shush and runs away when you come near. That it's like, it's leading you to the side content and then letting you engage with it. But it's not just going like, go here, do this thing for me, please. And that's,
there, in that quest, like, there are multiple characters, right? Like, you can also talk to some people who are like, well, there's been a thief, going around, etc.
Or the fish will give you a hint on it too. Like,
that felt very post Majora's Mask. Obviously, it can't really do what Majora's Mask does, because so much of that is based on the calendar, the fact that, you've got the same 3 days and everything plays out like clockwork. And, you can't do that with just the sort of way that this is more like Ocarina, obviously, in terms of the way that the NPCs are just kind of there, hovering. Sometimes they're in one place during the day, they're at one place at night, and that's kind of it. But they felt like they were trying to take some of the stuff they did in Majora and work it back into the Ocarina kind of template.
Yeah. I am kind of surprised at how much fun I've been having with this. Like, considering I've played it so many times, but I apparently fell off this game last time I tried to play it. Maybe it's because that was 2014 and it's been almost a decade.
No, exactly. Like, it's weird to think, because it's like, oh, well, Wind Waker was, very old, relatively, I guess, in 2014, like it's not like you'd played it just yesterday, then, but it's a hell of a lot older now. And, I assume in some ways maybe that it just got that extra sort of freshness, relative kind of freshness to it.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to going back and playing more, maybe tonight, even though I feel like crap. I will say the gamepad dying has been really annoying.
Yeah, the way I've been playing it is I've sort of had the gamepad off to the side, and I've been strictly relying. I'm playing it with the Pro controller, which interestingly enough, the Wii U Pro controller, it takes a long time to charge because mine was obviously dead. It was sitting, sitting in a drawer. So I had to charge it from being completely dead. It took a long time to charge, but then again, I am dealing with, like, for example, the PS5 controller, which dies in about 5 hours of playtime.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I've never used it that much, to be fair, but I remember it took a long time to deplete. Like, once you had it charged, you didn't have to recharge it for quite a while a lot of the time. Yeah,
you don't have to recharge it for a long time.
I guess it's because some of the functionality it doesn't have, compared to more recent controllers. But still, I was it always felt like, because I didn't tend to use it that much. I used a lot of off TV play and stuff. But when I needed it, it worked. That was for sure. But I do want to mention that. Like I said, the first time I played this, I didn't play it on TV too much, but actually I've just had the thought that I did a little bit of playing this on TV, here, and it's probably the first time I've actually seen the game in, like, true high definition, because the TV I played this on back in 2013 was not quite a 1080p set. It was a relatively early, LCD flat screen and it wasn't that big. So it didn't really matter that it wasn't, like, quite 1080p, you know what I mean? I think it was above, like, 720, but it was below 1080. It was this weird Sony set that kind of topped out a little bit lower. But I think this did actually, not that many Wii U games did actually display in 1080p, really, because, it couldn't run them. A lot of Switch games don't they? But because this was relatively a simple game, they didn't touch the geometry at all, as far as I know. It was just the textures and the lighting that changed. They could actually output this at full resolution. And so I played this on my current TV, and it is very, very good looking, and still, even now, there's just those, and I'm sure I mentioned this various times down the years, there's just those occasions where the new lighting, when it's in, like, low light, soft kind of ambient light, it kind of betrays the kind of low polygon nature of everything, once the actual, like, bright toon shading direct light is gone, it's like, oh yeah, I'm just looking at a bunch of low poly models that are kind of like plasticine things. And it breaks the illusion. But when it works, it really works. Like, think of the Tower of the Gods. You're inside for a long time, and then you come outside, and it's that bloom, that was the main kind of addition. Just the eye-searingly bright, light coming off the ocean of coming outside for the first time in a while. It really works. It's so evocative of, like, this vast ocean. It's kind of beautiful, but it's kind of almost oppressively bright and beautiful. Like, it brings this sense of, like, it's, it is still, like, a catastrophe what's happened to the world and stuff. I felt like, I wouldn't have had this sense from the GameCube. The way the GameCube, even though in some areas I think the GameCube is the more pure expression of this aesthetic, and I kind of prefer it at times.
Yeah, the GameCube aesthetic is much more cartoon. Like, it looks less, like you said, plasticine is the right call. But yeah, that scene is particularly poignant because that's also, you're not playing this for the 8th time, which is apparently what I'm doing, where you just found out that actually all this water is not natural and it is the result of a calamity. Like, there's been, like, we got some of that early on, but now we've actually got to see what that meant, like how that actually manifested. Cause of course the opening intro gives the game away. Like, it says, like, and then the gods dropped a bunch of rain. But now we've seen it with our own eyes, and then it comes out and the game literally fucking blinds you.
It's an absolutely brilliant intro, by the way. You have to say, it's one of the very finest examples of making a game that had come out essentially 4 years earlier seem like something from hallowed antiquity. It's brilliant. It's kind of massively conceited, but the way it executes it with the music and the sort of, this kind of fictionalized, mythologized account of the game you played 4 years ago. It's just beautiful.
And the follow on of like why it's so important that Link shows up every time, because that one time he didn't, everything went to hell. But also it's the song really sets the theme for the game as well. It's kind of that piece is really nice, and I'm going to recommend that we use it at some point during this episode if we can. But we'll have another episode where we could talk about it. But we wanted to cut off at an hour, and so that's what we're going to do. We are going to do a much longer conversation on this when Guillaume returns to us. We'll probably dedicate an entire episode to it, because I think this game probably deserves it.
Hopefully we'll be reading some readers' comments.
We will definitely include reader comments.
There's loads of stuff in the Discord thread I was looking at tonight. Yeah, we've got a lot of
we got some emails,
granular stuff. Yeah, no, that's true.
We have some talkback threads on the website. So yeah, we've got lots of content. We just we wanted to keep this relatively tight ship for now. So we'll pun not intended. We'll get into that. We'll get into some of this game's legacy as well, because of course it inspired 2 follow-on games, at least 3 if you want to count Tetra Trackers, which we never got to play, which I'm still mad. And an art style, like there's a lot we could talk about there.
It does remind me that I kind of miss this Link design, because the thing about it is, for all the shit it got, that was the Link design in a lot of games afterwards, even like as going as far into the future as Triforce Heroes. But since then, he's been gone. Like this version of Link, other than being in Smash Brothers, because the Link's Awakening remake, I don't begrudge it. I think it's a really kind of cute, the thing they did with the toy like design and all that. There's an amiibo of it, all that kind of stuff. Like
it's different.
It's a good call, but it's different. Yeah, just like he became a staple of the series. It wasn't the only Link we had. We had Twilight Princess come and go, Skyward Sword, all this stuff, but there kept being new things, Minish Cap and Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks and the Triforce Heroes, all these things that kept coming along, that kept it alive. And now it's like, this has been gone. Like this Link has been gone for quite some years now. I hope we can get something to bring it back before too long.
I would be very happy if we got this Link again. I think this Link is probably my favorite Link design at this point, just because of how everything he does is funny and goofy and a little bit silly and childish, and it really kind of sells the fact this game, more than maybe any other Zelda game, feels like a fairy tale.
Yeah, and it's more unique than the adult Link,
Also, I could draw this Link. It's really...
yeah.
I know we're trying to close this, but I think this is the most... the moment that I need to point this out.
Okay.
Future Boy Conan is the inspiration for this Link, for this world, for most of the story, for his sister, for the pig on Outside Island.
I mean...
it is like he's sidling against buildings because of Future Boy Conan. It is amazing just how much inspiration it took from that series.
I don't think Future Boy Conan, I don't think he looks super much like Link here.
Yes and no. Yeah, okay. So maybe not the style, but I mean, like, the fact that he's a child, I think, was inspired by that. The fact that the world is post-apocalyptic, underwater, that you start on a tiny island living with your grandma. Like, Future Boy Conan, like, he lives with his grandpa. there's the pig in that series, like that's the reason why there are not cuckoos, there are pigs.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the thing, is it seems conspicuous that it's not, because cuckoos are like what it always is, like that's the stock Zelda animal. So the fact that it wasn't feels like maybe someone almost wanted to put it in there almost like as an acknowledgement, like this is what we're kind of paying tribute to / borrowing liberally from.
Yeah, and like his sister, Link's sister, Ariel, like there's like a hint that, she doesn't speak to birds, but like they follow her around, you know, like you find her because there's a suspicious number of birds hovering around Forsaken Fortress. So all of that, like that's all from that show. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I love it. It's funny how like I couldn't have known that back when I first played the game. But now that I've seen that series, I can see the inspiration, and it's pretty cool. It's like when you watch The Simpsons and then you watch what inspired such and such scene. You know? You're like, oh, that's where they took it from. Okay, cool.
I think this Link being young, you couldn't have put like upper teenage Link in this game because so much of the game is about the fact that everything's being told from the perspective of Small Fry. Like he's very small. Like just go walk up to the adults. He's like 8. He's a child.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is the 3D Zelda game that feels most like the original 2D Zelda games.
Yeah, and it's important to note that like the character that he's dressed up because it's his birthday, and he's reached the age of maturity, which is the age that the Link of Ocarina of Time began his journey.
Which was 7. Was he 7, right? Was he was 7 and he became isn't quote unquote adult Link like 14 or something? He's not actually like a full grown man.
He's teenage Link. But of course, the funny thing there is that nobody knew what child Link was doing. So why is that the part of him that's a hero? In fact, nobody knew what Link did. The entire end of Zelda of Ocarina of Time is Zelda going, hey, all that shit you did? Yeah, nobody's going to remember it.
Well, Peace. Yeah, but I don't know they had this in mind necessarily with Wind Waker, but, when they made Wind Waker, I should say, but, they decided, there is a timeline where people remember, and then there's a timeline where they don't, and that's how we got the whole split timeline thing. Yeah.
But they would remember adult Link, not child Link.
I think they changed their mind on where this fit into that at some point.
Because it's all made up.
Yeah, but you could also say that, like people have forgotten, canonically in the game, then the Wind Waker, like, it became legend.
Yeah.
Like it was knowledge, then they forgot. So maybe that's what she meant at the end of Ocarina of Time. Oh, they won't remember. And they didn't eventually. No? I don't know the end of Ocarina of Time that well.
Whatever you want it to be, that's how I feel about it. I think that's how Nintendo thinks about it most of the time. It's like, look, because like with Breath of the Wild, I think at one point it seemed like they were maybe thinking that it would be a post-Wind Waker game because there were people spotted references to like the fact that it seemed like there were like item descriptions about like, it's, from when like there was salt water here and stuff. That maybe the world of Breath of the Wild was, the world of Wind Waker uncovered. But then at some point it seems like they very much decided, no, it's post-Twilight Princess because he has mummified Ganon in that position that he was in at the end of Twilight Princess when you impaled him. So, they just, this whatever they want, whatever they feel like going with.
So we'll pick all this back up in the somewhat near future.
It'll be before Tears of the Kingdom, that's the main thing.
Yeah, it'll probably be right at the start of May. So we'll give this game the final wrap up, and we'll be ready to play Tears of the Kingdom at that point, and let that dominate RFN for, I'm gonna guess, 3 weeks minimum. So but I think we're gonna wrap it up for now. Guillaume, enjoy your time off.
Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna live my real life Breath of the Wild adventure. climbing mountains and then jumping off them.
Well, we're never going to see him again.
All right. Just don't do it in the rain.
Dubious culinary decisions.
That seems most believable. All right, but we'll miss you. But enjoy your time off, and we'll see you in about a month. Emails, obviously. Go to rfn@nintendoworldreport.com. That's rfn@nintendoworldreport.com. We will ask Guillaume to say the email address on his return to see if he has forgotten.
See if it's really him.
It's true. We got to test it. It could be a very unadvanced AI that has replaced him in the interim. Maybe that's how we'll cover the next few weeks. Who can say? But Greg.
Yes.
We need some music to end the show.
Well, especially because I was thinking, we've got to split this up over 2 episodes. I was thinking what they call the Wind Waker Symphonic Suite, I believe, part of the what was originally the 25th anniversary sort of concerts or orchestral performances. So you had kind of sections devoted to, I think they added stuff for the later performances, the 30th anniversary and sort of a bunch of stuff in between. But in that first run, which I saw, they had a Wind Waker Symphonic Suite, a Twilight Princess Symphonic Suite, where it's like, we're going to do like a medley, go through in very short form the kind of plot of the game to some extent, go to hit on some of the major themes and all that. But as you might imagine, such a thing is quite long, even though it's like compressing a lot into a relatively short period of time. It's over 10 minutes, so I don't want to use everything, especially because, I think we need to save the big finale for when we actually wrap this up next month. But what I am going to go with, I'm going to sort of make a little part from the middle where the orchestra kind of gets to the Great Sea theme, which is just one of the great overworld exploration kind of themes in the series. I really like the Twilight Princess one too, but the sea, it had to be really good, to be fair, I think, considering, the way that sailing is, especially the original without the Swift Sail and stuff, but it is really good. It is, I have to say, my memories of that concert, which, they were more than 10 years old now, this stood out as one of the moments of the whole thing, was the Wind Waker Symphonic Suite, just moving through some of the really memorable aspects of that game, and just hear, the instrument quality is a little bit better in the HD version, but it's
still midis.
It's
mostly.
Still synth. It's not like doesn't have the impact that you get with the live instruments, and especially hearing it live, it was quite something to kind of hear it come to life in that way. So I think, it will have a little bit of an air of to be continued about it that's only appropriate.
All right. Well, on that, it is time for us to go. Bye, everybody.
Later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.